On June 22, 1941, the German army crosses the Soviet border. The Wehrmacht panzers believe themselves invincible. Europe already burns behind them. But as an unknown angled silhouette emerges from the dust and mud, suddenly it becomes clear. Everything the German tankers thought about war was a lie. The man who designed this machine is not celebrating. He has been silenced. This is not merely a story of military triumph, but of deliberately concealed betrayal. Who was the brilliant, now forgotten engineer behind the legendary construction of the T-34? What secret ideas were taken from foreign designs without which this tank might never have been born? And why was he forced to drive his own prototype through death-sentenced test routes? A decision that may have cost him his life, years before the world ever heard the name T-34. The truth is more shocking than any wartime propaganda poster ever showed. This is a story about power, fear, and genius buried under the engine hood, at the heart of World War II's most infamous armored rivalry. September 1939. Poland falls in 27 days. May 1940. France collapses in 6 weeks. The Blitzkrieg doctrine proves devastatingly effective. Fast, coordinated, overwhelming. At the spearhead, German panzers. Panzer III, Panzer IV. Stukas. Supported by Stukas screaming from above. By June 1941, the German High Command has every reason for confidence. They have conquered nearly all of Western Europe. Their tanks have smashed through every army they encountered. Wehrmacht intelligence reports describe Soviet armor as obsolete, primitive, irrelevant. The T-26, the BT series, light tanks with thin armor. Easy prey. German tanker Hans von Luck later wrote, "We expected to be in Moscow by autumn. Our panzers had proven superior to everything we had faced." But 1,800 kilometers to the east, in Ukrainian design bureaus and factory halls, something is happening that German intelligence has completely missed. Kharkiv, the Comintern locomotive factory, 1939. A team of engineers works under brutal pressure. Mikhail Koshkin, age 42, chief designer. Alexander Morozov, age 34, his deputy. Nikolai Kucherenko, age 38, lead engineer. These men are not celebrities. They are not featured in Soviet propaganda posters. They work in obscurity, under threat. In Stalin's Soviet Union, failure means more than losing your job. It means arrest, gulag, execution. The NKVD secret police watch constantly. One wrong word, one failed test, one design flaw interpreted as sabotage, and you disappear. The T-34 did not emerge from nowhere. It was built on foundations that few people know about. Foundations that involved foreign technology, borrowed concepts, and deliberate silence about who truly deserves credit. 1930, Kharkov. American engineer J. Walter Christie sells his revolutionary suspension design to the Soviet Union. The Christie suspension, independent coil springs, large road wheels, exceptional speed and cross-country performance. The Americans reject Christie's designs. Too unconventional, too expensive. But the Soviets see potential. They purchased 2 Christie tanks and shipped them to Ukraine under false documentation, labeled as agricultural tractors. Soviet engineers reverse engineer everything. The result? The BT series. Fast tanks, but lightly armored. Not enough for modern warfare. But the suspension system? That becomes the secret weapon. 1937. Stalin's Great Purge reaches the Red Army. Thousands of officers executed. Engineers arrested on fabricated charges of espionage. Innovation becomes dangerous. Safety lies in copying existing designs, not creating new ones. But Mikhail Koshkin is different. Born in 1898 to a peasant family, self-educated, rose through technical institutes. He survives the purges by staying quiet, working relentlessly, avoiding attention. In 1937, he becomes chief designer at the Kharkiv plant. His assignment? Create a replacement for the BT series, a medium tank, modern, reliable. He begins with the A-20 prototype, a traditional design. But Koshkin sees something the military bureaucrats do not. War is coming. And it will not be like the small border conflicts of the 1930s. It will be massive, industrial, total. What the Red Army needs is not the fastest tank or the most sophisticated tank. They need a tank that can be mass-produced, that can survive hits, that ordinary conscripts can operate. Most importantly, sloped armor. Sloped armor is not a Soviet invention. French tanks experimented with it in the 1930s, but no one had applied it systematically, radically. Koshkin understands the mathematics. A flat 45mm armor plate stops certain rounds, but angle that same 45mm plate at 60 degrees, and suddenly it provides protection equivalent to 90mm. Weight stays the same, cost stays the same, but survivability doubles. 1939, the A-32 prototype. Koshkin defies orders. The military wants the A-20, a light, fast tank with traditional vertical armor. Koshkin builds two prototypes, the A-20, as ordered, and secretly the A-32, heavier, thicker armor, angled hull. He is risking everything. If the military rejects his unauthorized design, he could be accused of wasting state resources, sabotage, treason. But in September 1939, both prototypes are demonstrated to military officials. The A-32 performs better in every metric except top speed. The commission is impressed, but hesitant. Heavier armor means more fuel consumption, slower strategic movement. Koshkin argues passionately. Speed is worthless if the tank is destroyed in the first engagement. January 1940, final approval. The tank will be designated T-34, production authorized. But Koshkin is not celebrating. He knows the design is not perfect. The prototype testing was rushed. There are mechanical issues. The transmission is problematic. The clutch system needs redesign. The optics are inadequate. But there is no time. Germany is conquering Europe. War is inevitable. Koshkin makes a desperate decision. March 1940. Mikhail Koshkin is already sick. Chronic pneumonia, exhaustion. The brutal pace of development has destroyed his health. But the military is skeptical. They demand proof that the T-34 can survive real battlefield conditions. Koshkin proposes an extreme test. Drive two T-34 prototypes from Kharkiv to Moscow, 750 kilometers. Then to the ongoing winter war against Finland and back, another 3,000 kilometers total. In winter, through mud, snow, and primitive roads. The military agrees. If the tanks survive, production begins immediately. March 5, 1940. Koshkin himself climbs into the driver's seat of the lead T-34. His deputy, Alexander Morozov, commands the second tank. The journey is hell. Temperatures drop to minus 20 degrees Celsius. The tanks break through ice on rivers. Transmissions overheat despite the freezing cold. Koshkin drives for hours, refusing to rest, obsessed with proving his design works. By the time they reach Moscow, he is coughing blood. The demonstrations in front of Stalin and military leadership are successful. The T-34 is approved for mass production. But Koshkin collapses immediately after. Pneumonia has become severe, possibly tuberculosis. He is hospitalized. September 26, 1940. Mikhail Koshkin dies, age 42. The official cause, pneumonia complications. The real cause? He drove himself to death to prove his tank worked. The T-34 production begins in late 1940. By June 1941, approximately 1,200 T-34s have been produced. Koshkin never sees his creation in combat. His name is barely mentioned in Soviet propaganda. The glory goes to Stalin, to the Red Army, to the workers, but not to the engineer who sacrificed everything. June 22, 1941, 3:15 a.m. 3 million German soldiers cross the Soviet border. 3,600 tanks, 2,700 aircraft. The largest invasion force in history. The Soviet border forces are annihilated. Entire armies encircled. Within 3 weeks, the Wehrmacht advances 500 kilometers into Soviet territory. German tankers report easy victories. Soviet T-26 and BT tanks are slaughtered. Panzer Commander Otto Karius later wrote, "We felt invincible. Soviet armor was a joke, thin, poorly organized. Our 37mm and 50mm guns destroyed them effortlessly." But in late June, near the town of Rozhenie in Lithuania, something changes. June 23, 1941. Rozhenie. Kampfgruppe von Zeckendorf, part of the 6th Panzer Division, is advancing rapidly. Suddenly, their column stops. A lone Soviet tank blocks the road. Model unknown. German anti-tank guns open fire, 50mm rounds. The shots bounce off. Panzer III's maneuver to engage. Their shells ricochet harmlessly off the angled armor. For 24 hours, this single tank holds up an entire German battle group. It destroys 12 German vehicles before finally being knocked out by engineers planting explosives onto the tracks. When German officers examine the wreck, they are shocked. Angled armor, 76mm gun, wide tracks, simple but robust construction. This is the T-34, and the Germans realize they have nothing that can reliably penetrate it from the front. July 1941. Encirclement at Minsk. General Heinz Guderian, commander of Panzer Group II, writes in his report, "The appearance of the T-34 tank has caused considerable alarm. Our 37mm and 50mm anti-tank guns are ineffective against its frontal armor. Infantry units are defenseless. German tankers begin calling the T-34 der Ungeheuer, the monster. But here is the terrible irony. Despite having a superior tank, the Soviet Union is losing catastrophically. Why? By December 1941, the Red Army has lost nearly 20,000 tanks. Most T-34s are destroyed not in fair tank duels but through airstrikes. German Stukas and medium bombers dominate Soviet skies. Mechanical breakdown. Rushed production means quality control is inconsistent. Transmissions fail. Engines seize. Crew training. Many T-34 crews have less than 10 hours of training before being thrown into combat. They do not know how to maneuver, how to aim, how to maintain their vehicles. Supply collapse, fuel shortages, ammunition shortages, spare parts non-existent. Tactical incompetence. Soviet officers, decimated by Stalin's purges, often send tanks into suicidal frontal assaults without infantry or artillery support. The T-34 is brilliant, but it is not enough. The Germans adapt quickly. November 1941, near Moscow. The Wehrmacht offensive stalls. Winter has arrived early. Temperatures drop to -40 degrees Celsius. German vehicles freeze. Engines will not start. Lubricants congeal. But T-34s continue operating. Their diesel engines and wide tracks handle cold and mud better than German panzers. For the first time, German commanders experience technological inferiority. Panic spreads through the high command. November 25, 1941. A special commission. The German Army Weapons Office forms a commission to study captured T-34s. Engineers from Daimler-Benz, MAN, and Henschel examine the Soviet tank in detail. Their conclusions are humiliating. The T-34's sloped armor is superior to German designs. The 76mm gun is more effective than the Panzer IV's 75mm gun. The Christie suspension provides better cross-country performance. The diesel engine is more fuel-efficient and less flammable than German gasoline engines. Some German engineers propose simply copying the T-34 directly. Ferdinand Porsche argues against it. We cannot admit that Soviet engineering is superior to German engineering. The compromise? Develop entirely new heavy tanks, incorporating lessons learned from the T-34. The result? The Panther tank and the Tiger tank. 1942, the escalation. The Germans begin deploying better anti-tank weapons. The long-barreled 75mm gun on the Panzer IV. The 88mm flak gun adapted for anti-tank use. The Tiger I heavy tank with its devastating 88mm gun. Suddenly, T-34s are vulnerable again. The Soviets respond with the T-34-85, upgunned with an 85mm cannon, better turret design, improved optics. An arms race has begun, triggered by one tank design. Let's be clear about something. The T-34 was not a perfect tank. It was not a wonder weapon. It had serious, often fatal flaws. Inside a T-34, the crew's nightmare. Cramped interior, 4 men squeezed into a space designed for minimal comfort. The commander had to also serve as the gunner. Impossible task. German tanks had separate commanders and gunners. Vision blocks were poor. Soviet tankers often rode with hatches open to see anything, making them vulnerable to snipers and artillery. The transmission was notoriously unreliable. Many T-34s broke down before ever seeing combat. The radio equipment, when present, was low quality. Communication between tanks was nearly impossible. Ammunition storage was dangerous. Shells stored loosely in the hull. One penetrating hit could cause catastrophic explosion. Production quality, a lottery. A T-34 built in the Kharkiv plant in 1940 might last 3,000 kilometers. A T-34 built in a hastily evacuated Urals factory in 1942 might break down after 300 kilometers. Quality control was sacrificed for quantity. Soviet doctrine accepted this. Better to have 10 mediocre tanks than 2 perfect ones. So, why did the T-34 become legendary? Because it was good enough. Good enough armor to survive most hits. Good enough gun to destroy most targets. Good enough mobility to keep pace with operations. And crucially, simple enough to mass produce. Between 1940 and 1945, the Soviet Union produced over 84,000 T-34 tanks. Germany produced approximately 6,000 Panthers and 1,350 Tigers. The T-34 won not through technical perfection, but through overwhelming numbers combined with acceptable performance. This is the secret that military historians understand but propaganda ignores. Wars are not won by the best technology. They are won by good enough technology deployed in sufficient quantities at the right time. Mikhail Koshkin died in 1940. His name appeared occasionally in Soviet technical journals, but he was never celebrated like generals or war heroes. Why? Reason 1. Stalin's cult of personality. All victories had to be attributed to Stalin's genius. Engineers and designers were merely executing his vision. Individual credit was politically dangerous. Reason 2. Foreign technology. The T-34 was built on the Christie suspension, an American design. Soviet propaganda could not admit that their greatest tank relied on capitalist engineering. Reason 3. The purges. Many engineers who contributed to early tank development were arrested or executed in the 1930s. To acknowledge their contributions would mean admitting Stalin's purges killed valuable people. So the official narrative became, the T-34 was a triumph of Soviet collective effort under Stalin's leadership. No individual names, no foreign influences, no uncomfortable questions. Alexander Morozov, Koshkin's deputy, continued developing the T-34 throughout the war. He created the T-34-85, later the T-44 and T-54 tanks. He lived until 1979, received some recognition late in life, but never the fame he deserved. Most designers worked in obscurity. State secrets meant their work could never be publicized. Some were arrested on false charges even after the war, accused of sharing secrets with the West. Their punishment for creating the weapon that saved the Soviet Union? Suspicion. Surveillance. Silence. The T-34 did not win World War II alone, but it changed the war in ways few other weapons did. It forced Germany to abandon Blitzkrieg tactics on the Eastern Front. It compelled German industry to shift from medium tanks to heavy tanks, consuming resources desperately needed elsewhere. It proved that mass production of adequate technology could defeat smaller numbers of superior technology. Every modern tank uses sloped armor. The T-34 made it standard. Post-war Soviet tanks, T-54, T-55, T-62, all descendants of the T-34 design philosophy. Simple, rugged, mass-producible. Over 100,000 T-34s and their variants were built. Some remained in service until the 1990s. Soviet tankers had a life expectancy measured in weeks during 1941 and 1942. Survival rate for a T-34 crew in the first year of war, approximately 7 battles. Thousands of men died inside these machines, burned alive, crushed, buried in steel coffins. The T-34 is celebrated as a symbol of Soviet victory. But for the men who fought in them, it was a claustrophobic, dangerous, often deadly workplace. The T-34 is not just a tank among many. It is proof that a machine born from compromises, built under threat, designed by silenced engineers, can still change the course of history. It is a reminder that wars are won not by perfection, but by pragmatism, not by individual genius, but by collective suffering, and not by those who take credit, but by those whose names are forgotten. Mikhail Koshkin died before his creation proved itself. He never received a state funeral. No monuments were built in his honor during his lifetime. But every time a military historian discusses tank warfare, every time a documentary covers the Eastern Front, every time someone mentions the weapons that shaped World War II. His legacy rolls forward, unstoppable, like the machine he created. The T-34, a legend built on silence, a triumph born from betrayal, and a weapon that redefined modern warfare.